Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today's video was previously shared on the Pinkfresh Studio YouTube channel, but I thought you would enjoy seeing it here as well. Today I am sharing the sweetest little birthday card featuring the Gelato on the Go stamps, stencils, and dies, which are brand new from the Delights and Doodles release from Pinkfresh Studio. And I'm going to show you how you can alter these stamped and stenciled images to create a custom look. I'm starting out by placing some white cardstock into my Misty stamping tool, and I have that main image from the Gelato on the Go stamp set here. I'm just placing it in that lower right-hand corner. This is how I prefer to use my Misty, like a book, but I know many of you open it the other way, so whatever works for you. I'm inking up this stamp in some Misty Coast ink, and I'm focusing on just the cart. So I tried not to ink up the rabbit at all. And any areas that I kind of over inked, I just wiped away with my finger. I'm using a really light gray ink for this because if I do go over, it won't be too noticeable, but basically I'm trying to only ink the cart. Now I did want to ink it up a second time to make it a little darker, and so I grabbed my ink cube instead. That helped me concentrate the ink in the areas that I needed it. And in hindsight, I think that's probably the way to go. If you have an ink cube option, it just makes it easier. So now you can see the image where I've inked up and stamped just the Gelato cart of this. I have a little overlap there. You can see towards the top of the image, but I'm going to be die cutting that so it's not going to affect the final product. Now that I have this stamped, I'm going to start my ink blending, and I'm starting with Stencil 1, and I'm going to ink with mint ink over these stripes on the Gelato cart, and then I'm going to wipe off my stencil, and I'm going to bring in just a little bit of Meadow towards the edges to give it a little bit of shading. You don't have to do a lot of this, and in fact, you don't have to do shading at all if that's not your thing, but I do like to switch over to a 1/2-inch blending brush for this process because it really helps me control where I'm placing that darker ink. Now I'm going to remove the stencil and I'm going to move on to the next stencil. And for this, I'm using some smaller blending brushes because I only want to get the areas that I want ink. I don't want to ink up the rabbit. I could, because in the end, I'm going to be die cutting this and kind of snipping some areas apart. But just to save time, I decided to only ink the areas that I needed. Now I did ink the umbrella with some Ballet slipper ink, and now I'm coming in with a little coral reef. I decided it got a little too red, so I went back over with the Ballet slipper, and now I'm just wiping up the stencil and moving on to the next one. For the little ice cream cone, I'm using Ballet slipper again, just concentrating my ink in that one area, and again, I'm going to use some shading with the coral reef ink. Once I've completed the shading on that stencil, I'll wipe my stencil and then I'll move on to the next stencil. I'm going to use some Misty Coast ink to ink up my umbrella stand and the wheel of that Gelato cart as well. I also have like the little handle there that I'm inking. Again, I'm avoiding the bunny. He does have some ink on him, but in the end, we're going to trim that down. I also took my brown blending brush. I didn't add any ink to it. I just used what was on it and blended in that cone. And now I'm ready to die cut my image. Now this is a one-piece die, so it's going to die cut the bunny, the cart, and the umbrella all in one piece. And then the ice cream cone is going to be a separate piece. But I'm going to show you how we're going to do some simple trimming to make this just a cart image. So I've run that through my die cut machine, and you can see I have the shape of my bunny there. I love that this cuts out all of the areas kind of between the bunny and the cart. And it also cuts out between the spokes of the wheel, which I think is so cool. I'm using my dual tip embellishment tool to poke those out. Now it's time to do a little trimming. So I'm just going to do a little snip on this bar here. That's going to separate my wheel from my bunny there. And then I'm taking my scissors and just kind of sneaking them in, and I'm going to trim around the handle of this cart. It's a very easy process. You can see I'm actually moving the paper, not the scissors. And there I have a separated image where I can just use the cart of this Gelato on the Go set. For my sentiment, I've grabbed this Sweet Birthday Wishes sentiment, and I am going to ink this up in some Versamark ink and do some silver embossing for this. So I've prepped the surface of my paper with a powder tool. I'm inking up with Versamark ink, and I'm stamping using my Misty stamping tool. That way, if I don't get enough ink on the first go around, I can re-ink and stamp again. Then I'll remove this from my Misty stamping tool, add some sterling embossing powder. This is from Brutus Monroe. I'm going to tap off the excess and then heat set this. Keep in mind, you only want to heat your embossing powder until it is smooth and non-granular looking. Then you want to move your heat tool, because if you overheat, you're going to move back into that rough and bumpy look. So it goes from kind of granular to smooth and then to rough and bumpy again. So if you're getting that rough and bumpy look, you may be overheating your embossing powder. Now I have the Petal Grid Press Plate, which coordinates with the Starry Scallop background die. These look so great together. And I am going to use my Glimmer hot foil to foil this in a matte silver foil onto some pink, very light pink cardstock. So I have my press plate with the pattern facing up on my Glimmer hot foil platform. I've allowed it to heat up, and once the platform has reached its full heat, I'm going to hit that timer button. Once the timer has completed, I'll remove the platform from the base of the Glimmer hot foil machine and take this over to my Platinum 6. I'll add my foil with the pretty side of the foil facing the pretty side of my press plate. Then I will add my colored cardstock and my thin shim and embossing pad that come, or the spacer pad, I'm sorry, that come with the Glimmer hot foil system, and I'll run that through my die cut machine. Once I've run that through, I can do the peel and reveal, and you can see this perfectly hot foiled image in that beautiful matte silver hot foil on this pink cardstock. Now this background gets even better because it looks great with just the hot foil, but when you combine it with the Starry Scallop background die and die cut it, it becomes absolutely magical. I love this background die. It looks great on its own, but it also looks great with the combination of the press plate. And keep in mind, if you don't own a hot foil system, you can also make impressions with these press plates, or you can use them with your Better Press system. Now I have the double stitched elongated oval. I've die cut that from some vellum, and I've die cut a few extra layers of my sentiment using some white cardstock. I'm adding some Pinkfresh Studio liquid glue on top of those 3 additional layers and stacking my heat embossed sentiment on top of those. Once I have that done, I'm ready to assemble my card. So I've added some foam adhesive to the back of my gelato cart, and I'm going to add this on to that vellum elongated oval that I've die cut there. I'm adding this kind of over to that left-hand side to make room for my sentiment to kind of come off the right side of that cart. So I'll just position that and get that pressed down. And then I will grab my little ice cream cone. This also has some foam adhesive on the back, and I'm removing the backer from that foam adhesive and placing that on my little gelato cart. Isn't this sweet? I love this card. Finally, I'll take my sentiment. I have some foam adhesive just on the back side of the right side of the sentiment so that it will sit even with the gelato cart, and I'm attaching that to the vellum as well. Now, once I have everything positioned on my elongated oval here, that vellum elongated oval, I'm going to add some foam adhesive to the back of this oval that's kind of nested behind the areas of my images. And I'll add this to my Starry Scallop Petal Grid hot foiled background there. I'm just positioning it over to the left side of the card, and I'm using the lines on that Petal Grid and Starry Scallop background to make sure that I have this kind of perpendicular on my card. I'm going to finish my card off by adding some glitter drops in the leafy color. I'm using my Pinkfresh Studio liquid glue and my dual-tipped embellishment tool to add those on to the front of the card, and these look absolutely fabulous with that mint and meadow ink. I decided to add some mint cardstock behind my Starry Scallop background here, so I'm just adding that to the front of my A2 size card, and then I can add some liquid glue on the back of this background and attach it to my card front. You can see I'm just running it in vertical lines where it can be hidden. I'm not over gluing this because I don't want the glue to kind of squeeze out and come through the holes of that Starry Scallop background, so just be aware of the amount of glue that you're using. You don't need a ton of liquid glue. You just need to make sure that it's in the right areas. Then I can line this up to the front of my card, kind of scooch it into place and press it down. And that finishes off this sweet birthday card featuring the Gelato on the go stamps, stencils, and dies from the Delights and Doodles release from Pinkfresh Studio. I love the way this card turned out. I love the extra little mint sparkles on there. I guess they're actually leafy, but they look mint to me. And I hope you enjoyed this video showing how you can take these stamped and stenciled images and really customize them to be the images that you want them to be. Now, as always, I will have links to the featured products used in this video tutorial in the YouTube description below. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. And of course, I just want to say thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of the card making and paper crafting video tutorials shared here. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.